but sometimes the friends and what they do supersede what we say in the home. I see that with my son on a regular basis. This is not something that I have down to a science. However, I recognize that the fact that we're dealing with kids, and one thing we know about kids is repetition is the father of learning.
Welcome to a new episode of the Generation Youth Podcast. I'm the host, James McLamb. I'm here, Walter Cullin Jr. Listen, if you people were part of the summit this past summer of 25, you probably were able to see and witness some of his presentations during the summit during that time. Welcome to the show, and thank you again for being one of our summit presenters. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Nice to be here, James. Thanks a lot. Sorry it's been a while, but I appreciate you for being patient with me.
Oh, it's all good, and things come together when it's all intended, and in our providential meetings happen. So, and it's kind of that way how you and I connected. We connected through a mutual friend who was also a part of the summit, Ray, and I asked her at the end of my first meeting with her. I says, "Do you know anyone that I need to know?" And the only
Mhm.
name that she came up with was yours. And within 5 minutes of getting off the call with her, she had already sent me your contact information. So she thinks highly of you. Uh,
Yeah. Shout out Ray. Love Ray.
yes. Well, before we go any farther, our audience are like, who in the world is James talking to today? They'd love to hear
Mhm.
from you a little bit about you.
Mhm.
They want me to shut up, I'm sure. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself to the Generation Youth Podcast.
All right. Well, my name is Walter Cullin Jr. I am a junior. I wear that proudly because I have a third, which is my son. Born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I did live in Georgia for about 2 years as a kid, from about 6 to 8, 6-year-olds to 8. Been in education for about 13. Well, actually now it's like 15 plus years, from K through 12, and now in higher ed at a technical college here in Milwaukee. I've worked in the healthcare field. But I fell into teaching in 2012. And I began teaching second grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, eighth grade. And I dibble and dabble back into healthcare, but I stayed in the education realm. There was something about students, something about kids that I enjoy. So I continue to try to do that through a lot of the things that I write, a lot of the things that I do in the community, the podcasting, all of those things are geared towards being resourceful for students and things like that. And then I also am a family man. I am a husband. So I have my wife. I have 4 children, 2 boys, and well, actually, sorry, 3 children. My apologies. And we're continuing to grow. I just have my little one, 7, 6, 25. So we're starting back over at square one, James. But here I am, continue to write things. I just had a book signing last weekend. Continue to try to collaborate and do things, and here I am.
Well, let's talk about that. What book did you just come out with, or was the signing for?
So I'm always thinking communal, right, James? So
Hmm.
obviously I pour a lot into the kids and things like that. And you've brought me on for the Ignite, the Empower Summit and things like that, working with kids. But I've also, as I've continued to grow more into this adulthood, right, and to expand the family and things like that, I thought about some of the things that I became bogged down with, right? The daily things we have to do, transporting kids to sports events, picking up from school, making sure bills are paid, standing up and being there for other people, showing up for other people. And I was like, man, I'm kind of getting bogged down. I was losing myself a little bit in terms of my regimen, exercise, and eating healthy. So I was like, you know what? I met with my buddy and I was like, dude, I just need a minute. Sometimes I just need a minute in the day. So we ended up, you were like, you know what? I've been talking to some other men and we're like, we're going to write a book and it's called I Just Need a Minute. It's a resource for refreshment and reprieve. And we wrote it specifically for men, but it is universal for the most part. But the main audience was males, for the sake of just reminding them of some things they can do. It's all practical strategies and things that you may even know, but it's a simple reminder, a place for journaling. We're not clinicians. We're just advocates for the mental health of men.
I love that, and I saw that the announcement of that over the last several months as you rolled that out, and have seen some of that content come across your pages. And I wanted them to share that so that they could see a little bit more about your heart, that you're really about caring for folks. But this is not your first foray into writing.
This is
You have
correct.
another book
Yes.
that you're probably known for a little bit more. Tell us a little bit about it.
So my very first book that you speak of is called Intrinsically Motivated: Shifting the Mindset of Students. That was written maybe 6 years ago. But the inception of it began when I was teaching in middle school. But I wrote that book for the sake of trying to infuse and empower and cultivate this inner drive to want to succeed for the sake of themselves, right? I found that teaching sixth grade and eighth grade and the middle school kids, a lot of times they want to do things for the extrinsic things, whether it's extra recess, money, a game, extra tech time, right? They always want to be on their
Yeah.
computers or on their phone. And it was one of it just dawned on me, and I just stopped the class. And I was just like, you know what? Like, are you telling me you only want to do well because of something that you'll get or because you want me to deliver on some extrinsic reward for you? And they looked at me, was like, kinda. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're gonna switch this whole thing up. And we came up with a mantra, and I was like, intrinsically motivated. And I sat there and I'm talking about it. I was like, okay, what don't I like? I don't like excuses. I understand the facts of things happening, but I don't like excuses. And we came up with it intrinsically motivated with no excuses. So whether it be homework, whether it be not delivering on a deliverable within your group, right? Not showing up, a lot of those things, if they forget something, it was like, okay, you told us the facts, but it's an excuse. And I didn't allow them to not be accountable for anything. So that's where that book came from years later, because that was in 2016 when that epiphany came about. I was like, we're going to change this thing. But that was in 2016. And I didn't write the book until about 2021.
Well, let me ask you this. What is wrong with the external, the
Hmm.
extrinsic motivation, the
Hmm.
little putting the carrot in front of them? The reason I ask that is because I'm hearing some parents in my head right now who are watching this and they're going, I have to do that. I have to promise ice cream to my, take ice cream for my middle schooler just to get him to
Hmm.
clean his room.
Hmm.
And a teacher, my wife is in her second week
Hmm.
going back into the classroom full time to finish out this calendar year for a friend of hers who's on maternity leave.
Hmm.
And my wife hadn't been in the classroom since our oldest was born. That's 25 years ago. So, good friend of hers also teaches the same curriculum. Saw what my wife was doing. My wife had been directing choirs and doing other stuff since then, but not in the
Hmm.
classroom. And one of the things she is I've got to, I got to give them a day to kind of dangle in front of them because these kids are not. They come into choir. Some of them just signed up because they thought it was easy, and I got to guide them. So what's wrong with that? What
Hmm.
is wrong with dangling the carrot in
I
front of them?
love that question. I appreciate that question because I always provide a disclaimer to let them know, like, I'm not saying do away with extrinsic rewards.
Okay, that's
I'm
good because
saying,
I don't.
you're right.
I got to get my ice cream, man.
No, no, for sure. Because I completely believe in like an 80-20, right? I really want it to be driven by the students, and then the other 20%, I'll provide them with something external. Obviously, we know that incentives do drive some, student success and things like that. But I've always been an advocate for not basing it solely on just incentivizing, because at the core of who you and I are, there's something inside of us that makes us want to become better individuals for ourselves, right? But then the external piece is that once I'm able to have this inner drive here, I'm able to influence the other people around me. I'm able to collaborate. I'm able to broaden my lexicon to be able to join in diverse conversations with a variety of people. And I stress that a lot to young people, in terms of just like up in their lexicon, things that they read, diversifying all that for the sake of themselves, for their own knowledge. I think my sister told me my first year in college back in 2005. I remember it was like my first week of college, and I was like, "Oh, Chris," her name is Crystal. I was like, "These professors are extremely smart. I love the content." I was taking like linguistics classes and things like that, and she was like, "I love that you're enjoying that. I love that you're." We're 12 years apart, and she's older. She was like, "I love that you're enjoying that," but she was like, "Don't forget to always, fact check that, and you be inquisitive in regards to that." And that's another thing. That was another tidbit she dropped into me in terms of that intrinsic motivation. Like, listen here, process it, but actually go look and verify it with yourself, to make sure that it resonates with you to be the truth. And intrinsically motivated is one of those things. It's inquiry based things. We're trying to problem solve, we're trying to collaborate, but we're also not allowing ourselves to go about doing something for the sake of just getting something in the end. What does it do for you inside here? And that's a struggle. That's a struggle
Yeah.
nowadays.
Well, that's exactly where I was going too. Is this seems like it's going to be a harder thing to do.
Hmm.
It seems like the external, the dangling the carrot in front of
Yes.
them. And for those of you who are like, what is he talking about this carrot stuff? There's a picture that you see all of a donkey, you know, and it has a stick over its back, and in front of it, just out of its reach,
Yep.
is a carrot. And the donkey keeps going forward because it thinks if it walks forward, it'll eventually be able to get to the carrot, and it keeps it motivated to move forward. And that's what I'm
Yep.
talking about when I say
Yes.
dangling the carrot. For those of you who are listening who are not familiar with my reference,
For sure.
and since I am Southern, you may not know a lot of the references that I do because there are some I'm very colloquial. But it's a lot easier to dangle the carrot. This seems like it's a hard thing to do.
Very.
So how can we do that? I'm a formula guy. Give
Mhm.
me a basic formula. Give
Mm.
me a step. Give me step one that I can start moving with so that I know how to shift off of this. How do I go? Because I guarantee you right now on this 80-20,
Mhm.
it's flipped on most people's houses.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, parents
Absolutely.
are flipping it.
Mhm.
So it's almost like they're doing the external motivation in reverse. I'll take away your device if you don't do that. It's that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yep.
It's not doing it for the sense of,
For you.
I give you an example. My oldest kid was very, very much the intrinsically motivated child. You didn't have to give her anything. She just drive. My son, the middle child, opposite. We had to go the opposite direction. And even then, when this is a great story. When he was like 3 years old, 2 years old, 2 years old maybe, and we were trying to potty train, my wife bought a car. The cars from the movie Pixar movie
Cars.
Cars.
Gotcha. Uh-huh.
Bought Lightning McQueen, put it up on a shelf and says, "You'll get that when you learn it." And this little 2-year-old literally would walk up to where it was on the shelf, look up at it, and go, "Not worth it." And then so we really had to up the external stuff. So how it's hard. How can I do this? How can I make this change as a
Mhm.
parent, as a teacher, as an
Mhm.
athletic coach? How can I make this change?
Listen, everything you said is absolutely true. It is an uphill battle.
Ooh,
For starters, I was fortunate to have those kids in sixth grade and eighth grade. So I was able to build that gradually over time. I didn't have them in seventh grade. So
yeah, and
I
some
would have
other
thought,
teacher ruined them in that period.
right. So, I mean, but think about it. That's realistic because when we think about our kids, they go to school, they're in their, they're in their community, they're around a variety of different people, right? And the parents, we try to instill these values, try to instill these things inside of them and cultivate this intrinsic motivation, if you
Mhm.
will. But sometimes the friends and what they do supersede what we say in the home. I see that with my son on a regular basis. This is not something that I have down to a science. However, I recognize that the fact that we're dealing with kids, and one thing we know about kids is repetition is the father of learning, right? We
Ooh.
have to continue to allow, they're going to mess up over and over again. We just have to, it reminds me of my mother. When I was younger, I never wanted to clean my room and I never wanted to take out the garbage and things like that. But she constantly reminded me, you need to take out the garbage. You need to clean up a room. Now that once I became an adult, I never wanted my house dirty. I never wanted my room. You know what I mean? So it's like you continue to plant these seeds. You may not even be
Mhm.
able to see the fruits of your labor until they get grown. However, the intrinsic motivation in the classroom, as a teacher, you hold fast to that. And that's from day one. So the first 2 weeks of class, what I would do is prior to any curriculum, we set the norms, we went over our syllabus, and we practiced those norms. We practiced what we were going to do, some of the things we might say. We studied our mantra because once I created that mantra in 2016, I pushed it on further for every class, right? So out right away, this is what we're doing, this is what we're capable of, this is what we're going to try to get to. And that was something I hammered on a daily basis from day one. So I never let up. But those first 2 weeks are very, very crucial for a teacher in terms of like setting their norms and getting their classroom community. But another thing that you can do is obviously sometimes our voices can fall on deaf ears, right? So you find a student, you find a peer, you find somebody for them to be paired up against to actually see and for them to emulate that for the students. Because there's somebody in that classroom, there's somebody in that friend group that has that intrinsic motive. Like you said, your daughter was, right? But your
Yes.
son wasn't, right? And like you
Oh,
said, how many years apart are they?
3. They're 3 years apart.
They're 3 years apart. Okay,
Mhm.
they're still somewhat close in age, but obviously, you still have that dynamic and things like that. But my sister and I were 12 years apart. Fortunate enough, I was able to see somebody that
But
was.
there's another one that's, 7 years apart between the second and the third one. So, uh,
Oh, so another
she's
gap.
yep, another gap, and she's a sophomore, so.
Got you, got you. But I think it's a lot of collaborative work, and I know that sometimes it's retooling. You gotta think about it. Those kids would come back from the weekend and from wherever they were with their parents, with their dad, with their grandma, and, I have to redo it. But at the end of the day, I still talk to these kids now, and they're telling me about this mantra. You know what I mean? The fact that it
Hmm.
still drives their lives. Like, so I continue to plant those seeds. I'm all fine and dandy with extrinsic, but I want the core foundation to be intrinsic. And that's the ways I used to try to do it. For parents, it's a little tougher. It's a little
Yeah.
tougher. I'll tell you that because I'm an author of the intrinsic motivator. And my son, I look at him sometimes and like, you are putting me to shame. How am I professing this to these people? And you know what I mean? So it's a challenge
I
for
know
sure.
exactly what you mean. I
Easy
look at my
laughing.
I look at my kids sometimes and say, "You do know that I wrote the book
Yeah.
on how to work with youth and how to coach youth. You do know that's what I'm known for,
You're
right? I'm the
right.
guy who writes this stuff and
Right.
teaches this stuff. Please let me look good here." So,
Right. But my buddy always reminds me like we're in a new time and a new age. You know what I mean? In terms of the instant gratification period, things. We got all this technology, we got all of these things that are going on versus prior to, you and I, right?
mhm.
So those things at the fingertips. So I try to take it with a grain of salt and just continue to push it. I repeat over and over again, these conscious talks. I was just talking to my son this morning about things just that translates not only from school to life to even sports. He plays basketball and soccer. And I'm just like, man, like the leadership piece, the drive piece, like I want you to get it for the sake of yourself. I don't want to have to push you to do it. I'm here to guide you and facilitate. And that's one thing I always told my students, like I'm the facilitator of your learning. What you do with it is what you do with it. So I place a lot of onus on a lot of the students to try to challenge them while still scaffolding and providing that assistance when needed, though. It's a fun process for me.
Parents are the same way. Any adults working with youth are the same way.
Hmm.
They are motivated both by the same things, both external and
Yeah.
internal. So most of us are motivated by that external because of seeing the success of the child.
Hmm.
As a teacher, I taught in the classroom for a decade, and an external motivation was seeing their grades, getting recognized by people
Absolutely.
as doing stuff, winning awards for in contests while they're doing things under my
Hmm.
tutelage. That's an external stuff.
Absolutely.
So to think about it in external, to be able to pour into a child and doing this external, we actually have to dangle the carrot in front of the parent. They have to see what are the benefits going to be for me to spend this time.
Yeah.
And you just said, hey, you may be planting the seeds that you might not see. That's something right there. The parent are like, well, if I'm not going to see it now, or teachers like, I'm
Right.
not planting the seed for Mr. Cullen to reap
Reap the
4 years
benefit.
later.
Right.
I want to see it this year. So what's the benefits for them for doing this? What is the benefit for an adult to
Hmm.
change their mindset on
Hmm.
how they approach motivating their students?
I think as a teacher, I've always looked at it as I was providing a service. And in me providing that service to these students, I was like, okay, what else do I need to learn to be able to provide for the student? I'm all about the giving part. The receiving end that comes from it, the gratification I get is the fact that I gave it all. I provided it all. I exposed them to different things. I complemented the curriculum. If we were able to go on field trips, I don't know about where you are, but field trips have become almost obsolete here. And it's kind of weird that we don't get to expand and get out to, allow these students to see these different things. I mean, think about the zoo and the museum, right? But like for a teacher, it's different now, James. The educational landscape is so different. Like I just remember being so passionate about being able to come to the classroom and provide this education and look at it like, okay, was I boring today? And it was more so about that for me. Like, how do I flip this and make this more engaging? And when I seen the kids smile and I see them interacting, that was enough for me. Because at the end, I want to see them towards the end if I can, or I'll get a teacher to call back from that same district and say, hey, such and such is doing great, but they're also having issues with this socially. Can you contact them? Can you talk to them? So those were the things. I never saw any kind of like external reward in terms of like, oh, you did this and you achieved that. That's for you. Me, I enjoy teaching. I enjoy
Yeah.
providing a service to you. I relish in being a servant leader and I don't look for anything in return. The only thing that I want in return is the fact that if I'm amongst colleagues or amongst other teachers, I want to be able to continue to, like we're doing right now, dialogue and let's talk about what's working, what's not working. What have you seen? What are the problems? And figure out those things. Because I truly believe that sometimes the seeds that we plant, we won't see it come to fruition. It won't come right in front of us. But if it does, that's great. And I'll take that external thing when it comes. But for me, it was always like more of a selfless act. And I really appreciate just being able to serve the students and serve the school in any capacity, whether I was an athletic director or a coach. Hey, great job. Keep going. What am I doing? How do I continue to get better for the sake of them? Because ultimately, when I'm the best, I can provide the better influence for those around me. So,
How about the young person? What are the benefits for them long term? What are we going to see from someone who
mhm.
has bought into this philosophy, who a young person who has shifted their mind from grabbing the carrot to making their own carrot, so to speak?
An increased internal agency where they're not driven by what somebody else has said, what somebody
Mm.
says, if somebody's cheering or not. They are still able to be disciplined enough and self-motivated, and they
Ah,
have a drive to want to continue to go no matter what and to endure. And James, and when I think about it, when you just brought that up, I'm thinking about students, and I think some people may think like when you're intrinsically motivated, you're going to succeed at everything. No, you're not. No, you're not. Because part of it being intrinsically motivated is being resilient. So if I get a D or a F on a quiz, I don't know if you guys use D's or F's, or we use up here, we're doing what is it? Standard based grading where you get one, two, threes, or fours. You know what I'm saying? If you get something poor, a poor, yeah, 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 let's talk about it. So imagine that. So if you're getting that, and let's say you you studied hard and you didn't get the grade you get, how are you going to respond? I have to be resilient. I have to be intrinsically motivated to get back up on their horse, right? And that aids them when they go on to high school. That aids them when they go on to college. I really try to get them early. The earlier the better, because remember, we can. It's easier to train them up when they're younger, as opposed to trying to shape their mind as they get older. Especially, our teenagers. I got a 17-year-old right now, and I can barely tell her anything. I can barely tell her anything. But that's what it does. It builds that self drive, that self discipline. If they get the extra claps, they appreciate it. It makes them want to go even harder, but they're already programmed to just keep going and reassess, to reflect. There's a lot of reflection in intrinsic motivation. I sit back and I'm aware of where I may have slipped, where I could have done
yeah,
better, creating a critical thinker, if you will, somebody that's really critical about the way they think. Assessing what do I need to change, but not really getting down. It's all about endurance as well, and we know that, those that are biblical, we know that the smartest don't always, get everything. The fastest doesn't always win the race and things like that. But continue to be able to get back up and persevere and push through. I think that's everything. And I fought myself. I'll be honest with you really quickly. I was not intrinsically motivated to be a doctor when I was in like 2005, 2006. I never took chemistry in high school. I took my anatomy classes, biology. I just knew I was going to do healthcare. I got to college, took a chemistry class. I got to see. I'm like, yeah, this is not for me. Like nomenclature and things like that. I sucked at that. So I'll be transparent and vulnerable with that. But I still end up working in the healthcare field.
well, I love those the two major benefits I saw that it came out of that answer was discipline, teaching them discipline, the self discipline, and the critical thinking. And
Mhm.
I think back to my two oldest, we're still in the process with the youngest, but the two oldest who are now, out of school and starting careers on their own, even though the son still probably is going to do some more schooling in some way or another as he fleshes out what he wants to do. The oldest is a teacher herself in her fourth year of teaching.
Okay.
But I think back to where they were. The oldest was very much self-disciplined and very critical, had that critical thinking skill on her own. Succeeded at most everything she put her mind to,
Mhm.
even though there might have been others that had better raw talent, she outworked them. Flip it, the son had better raw talent, better athletically, naturally smarter, even though he
Mhm.
says, no, she's smarter than me. I was like, no, she just works harder than you. And my wife and I've had this conversation so many times. Wouldn't it be great to have had a child that had child one's motivation, discipline, self reflection, the critical thinking, all the things you meant, and child two's
Mhm.
raw ability and
Mhm.
talent and
Mhm.
personality and athletic skills and looks. I mean, of course, the oldest is beautiful. She's a beautiful girl, but the second one is just like naturally everything was very, easy, came very
Mhm.
easy. So if we could combine them into one child,
Yeah.
then we'd have a Superman. It'd be
Yeah.
Superwoman. It'd be
There you
like
go.
the but that doesn't the way it happens.
Yeah,
It doesn't
exactly.
happen.
Exactly. Absolutely. You got the
Yeah.
varying, personalities, the characteristics, all those things matter, right? And it's crazy because you can be in the same household and you'll get two
Hmm.
different individuals, right? You can say
Yeah.
similar upbringings and just still go separate ways. But I think that's just the way of life, man. And when we're dealing with children, obviously the variety, and I mean, even as a teacher, remember we have to customize things for all of the students, right? So that's kind of what it is. We just layer it, provide the proper reps and repetitions and repeatings and guidance and things like that. And we continue to do that to the best of our ability for the sake of these students.
Is there an example of a student or an athlete that you have worked with that you could share an anecdote or share a success story?
Mhm.
It says they came and they were very much give me the carrot or else I'm not doing anything. And they left thinking I can make my own carrots. That could give some hope because I'm listening to parents, so they're like, this sounds great.
Yeah. Right.
It sounds like I would too, but I just don't think it can work. Is there?
Mhm.
I hate to put you on the spotlight like that, but I was just
Mhm.
thinking, hey, let's give them some hope here.
I have one. Her name is Maisha. She actually called me the other day.
Ooh, that's
She
always
graduated
wonderful.
college and things like that. So she's grown. I think she's 23 now. So
Yeah,
when she came to our school, she came from, and it's no knock, but I don't know if you know a lot about like Milwaukee. You got the public schools and you got the private school sector. Yeah. So she came from a public school. I was teaching at a parochial school at that time. The stereotype, and I'm not saying this is the case, is that the Milwaukee public schools is a lot more rambunctious, it's disorganized, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
And the private
That's not
okay,
isolated to that
right.
area. It's
Okay,
pretty much
I just
universal.
wanna make
Yeah,
sure because I don't wanna cast any disparages on anybody
yeah,
and, speak down. So, she comes from, a school called Townsend. She comes to Mesmer, and unfortunately, extrinsic incentives, or you could just be lazy, was kinda like the norm as to where she came from. So she comes to the class, and I remember it like it was yesterday, and that's why we are so close now, because it was like day 1 for her, and she came in and she thought it was public school. She thought she was at her other school, and Mr. Cullen had to set her straight. I had to set her straight, James. So I was like, I don't, and excuse me, I may miss some words, but I said, I don't know where you came from, but this is not how we do things here. The expectation is X, Y, and Z or whatnot. So we had that conversation. This was a whole class conversation because this is where we're building that classroom community. So we had that. She kind of sulked a little bit. I went to her on a 101 and we actually sat down and we spoke. And I was just like, listen, I'm one of those teachers going to call it how it is. I am going to challenge you. What school did you come from? And she told me, I was like, listen, this is not that. I don't know what you had going on here. I'm going to try to push you. And I want you to be autonomous in doing so. So weeks went on and she kind of was like, treading lightly, trying to come along, but barely doing her work and things like that. And she plays basketball. She plays basketball. So I was like, you know what? Let me build this relationship with her. I'm like, so you play hard in basketball because you want something externally, right? Because you want to be a better basketball player. But in the classroom, you don't want to provide that same effort for the sake of you becoming a better student. I don't think that's going to align. You know what I mean? When we're trying to do both these things. So she's like, well, Mr. Cullen, she was like, I'm at home. It's just, it's a big house with a lot of people in it. So I'm just like, oh, okay, I can understand that. I said, but what are you going to do for you? You can't try to do it for mom. You can't try to do it for your brothers. You got to do it for you right now. Let mom and them try to handle the best that they can. Long story short, she ends up not only being a star basketball player, but she ends up becoming a stellar student. Now, I'm not saying she was an A+ student and things like that, but she was in a B range, right? Fast forward to high school, she starts getting honors. Again, the only reason why I was able to plant this seed and see the fruit was because she stayed within the same district. She went to Mesmer High School. Then she goes off to college. She goes to, I think, Bryan and Stratton. She gets her degree, her associate's degree in childhood education. Now she's back working with students full circle and presenting that same information that I told her. The same information. And she just called me yesterday saying that she wanted to open her own childcare facility to provide that type of things. So it's like now my wheels are turning. I'm just like, how can I possibly open up a childcare facility that bases it on intrinsic motivation and bring her in because it would be great
ooh,
to partner with her. You know what I'm saying? So I have all these ideas, but that's just one individual. I have a couple of athletes as well. One he actually goes to Waldorf. His name is Cartier. Whew, he was one of those kids that I did not have in sixth or eighth grade. I was teaching eighth grade at the time, and he went to seventh grade. And seventh graders, I don't know if you know about seventh grade, but seventh graders. Woo, James, he came in like that, and me and him, we butted heads a little bit, but before you know it, he was actually a good kid. You know what I mean? And it was more so, so he was my champion for intrinsically motivated a lot of times. And still to this day, he'll write me on Instagram, pound intrinsically motivated and things like that, showing me his workout, showing me his work and things like that. So there's some others as well that I can't recall to mind, but those two specifically, because there were two different grades. And Maisha, she was kind of like a daughter to me, honestly. She was kind of like a daughter. So, and this was before I had my first child too.
Well, you know what? That is encouraging someone out there who to at least give it a look, at
Yeah,
least
give it a
give an
look.
opportunity to look. So
Absolutely, absolutely.
they're not going to get everything they need to know about how to do this
Hmm.
in our 35 minutes of conversation together.
Hmm.
How can they connect with you and
Hmm.
find out more about what this is? Where can they find you? How can they connect with you? Where can they get more information about this?
Obviously, like you reached out to me, you found me on LinkedIn. I am Walter
Mhm.
Cullin Jr. on LinkedIn, but also on my Instagram, intrinsically motivated. So you can reach out to me there. I have my email, intrinsically motivated for at gmail.com. And then be on the lookout because I'm working with Ray. And I actually have a few segments on some teacher resources, but I also have an interactive, intrinsically motivated module coming out. So that should be coming soon. I'll make sure I get you the details. I've been having to create the videos and things like that, and I have the platform ready. It's just me being critical, like I don't like how I sound on there. You know what I mean? Those type of things.
Yeah,
So that'll
I
be out. But
understand that.
Instagram,
You don't have
LinkedIn,
the
my
sophisticated
email.
Southern accent that I do, so it
There
doesn't
you
come
go.
across.
There you go. When I lived in Atlanta for 2 years, I was saying like down there and up there. You know what I mean? I was, but now I'm a city slicker, Jay. I'm a city slicker, man. I'm sorry,
And,
man.
and audience, if you didn't catch any of those sites that he just mentioned, they're going to be in the show notes. So if you guys would just go to your favorite app that you're listening to this on and look into show notes, you'll find it there. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can just look down and there'll be more there. So I want to thank you again for this fun conversation that's really enlightening, that
Mhm,
kind of opens up about how we can get them.
mhm.
What we're doing is we're producing an adult that is going to be driven and motivated of their own to thrive in life.
Yes.
We're not just trying to do it something temporal, which is what sometimes happens in that external thing,
Mhm.
getting temporal success. We're trying to build a foundation so that they can thrive long-term success. So I
Absolutely.
so admire your commitment to that. And because I think it does take a commitment to do it.
Yes.
And I'm excited to be able to share this with parents and teachers that
Mhm.
hopefully can start that journey to
Yeah, for
change
sure.
their mindset to help the youth that they interact with, whether it's their children
Mhm,
or their students, to grow and to thrive as well.
mhm.
So thank you so much for that.
No, for sure. Thank you for having me on. And I understand that the importance of a balance between intrinsic and extrinsic, especially when we're dealing with students. I understand the value and incentives, but I'm just a huge proponent advocate for, students being self-driven to try to do
Mhm.
better. And I think that when you're in front of the kids as a teacher, we can really try to cultivate that. Understand that when they leave your presence, it could be, you got to come back and retool it and redo it. But I think that's the challenge. I think that's the beauty of being able to be a teacher, is being able to try to get them to kind of like come over to your side and see what you understand, what you
Yeah.
have to offer. So shout out to all the teachers right now. I know it's a different type of climate for a lot of you, and just know that I'm always here. I'm always going to be a teacher advocate. Even when I was administrator, I always advocated for the
Yeah.
teachers. So
And audience, thank you for sticking with us. We appreciate you staying with us for so long. If you like the episode, you finding value in it, there's three things that I do this in every episode, but I want to reiterate it. I really want you to do three things for us. Number one, like the episode so that we can see that it did resonate with you. Two, comment on it or reach out to us to individually on our sites, maybe through Instagram or LinkedIn, to tell us what you learned or encourage us in that. But the most important thing that we ask you to do is someone needs to hear this episode, needs to get the insight that Walter has shared today. So please share this episode with that person who needs this so that this message can get out to as many people as possible. So thank you, Walter, and thank you, audience, for sticking with us for this long. And we'll see everybody really soon on another episode of the Generation Youth Podcast.